So before we move on to the Euros and the 2021-22 season, let's finish the 2020-21 season for good by ranking every single Championship club season from worst to best. Let's go. What's up everyone, welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. I'm going to be ranking every club's Championship season from worst to best via a tier list. On the left hand side of the screen is the tiers that I'm going to be ranking these tiers in. So I'll be very interested to hear your opinions in the comments down below. If you guys like what you see, please make sure you do give this video a like. It does tremendously help the channel. Please subscribe if you're new around here. It does really help. We're so close to 550 subscribers. If we can get to that, that'll be fantastically appreciated. And please share this channel to as many people as you can. But without any further ado, let's, in no particular order, start ranking all of these teams. We start with Barnsley, and it's been an unbelievable season really for Barnsley. For the fact that they achieved a top 6 place, 5th place was their final placement. And you've got to remember, at the start of the season, they didn't start all that well whatsoever. They went through 7 games without a win. Valeni and Ishmael found a little bit of consistency with each side. And of course, Barnsley went through a period of 8 wins in a row and 13 games unbeaten. And you would never have associated a Barnsley side to have that sort of consistency. I think for Barnsley to start off this tier list, I've got to give them at least a great season. It would have been elite if they somehow got promoted. We now go to Brentford, once again, a team who has had a fantastic season for all the right reasons. Obviously, they actually wanted to get automatically promoted, and they went through 21 games unbeaten at one stage of the season. And I thought, you know what, this actually might be Brentford's season, but unfortunately for them, they had 3 defeats in a row after their 21 unbeaten streak ended, and that was what ultimately killed Brentford's momentum. They then had to fight via the playoffs, and they righted the wrongs from what they had from last season, and at this time got promoted via the playoffs by beating Swansea 2-0 at Wembley. And I think for the fact that they've earned promotion to the top tier for the first time in 74 years, there's no other place I can give Brentford other than an elite tier. Well done, Brentford. Unbelievable achievement. We now go to Cardiff, and it's been a season of 2 halves really with Cardiff. Cardiff had a bit of inconsistency to start things off. Then all of a sudden, Neil Harris looked like he saved his job with 4 wins in a row, and then Cardiff was surging up the table. And then following from that, they had 5 defeats in a row, and then following 2 other games where they didn't win a single game. And then Neil Harris got sacked. So it looked like it was going to be a pretty perilous season for Cardiff. They were in the lower mid-table when he did get sacked. But they brought Mick McCarthy in, who I thought was an interesting appointment to say the least. But then following this appointment, they went through 12 games unbeaten, including a streak of 6 consecutive wins for Cardiff. And following this, they got into a decent position in the table, finishing in 8th place. It's a little bit below from what they should be, but I think considering the start that Cardiff had and for how Mick McCarthy has revived their season, I think it's been a decent season for Cardiff. I can't necessarily give them a great season because they've not finished in the top 6 and have not quite matched their expectations, but it's been okay. And now we go to Derby County. I'll be very interested to know where you're going to rank Derby. This season, there's been no hope really. They actually won only 1 game in their opening 16 matches, which is a shocking run of form to tell you the truth. Wayne Rooney goes in charge, and then all of a sudden, Derby managed to win 4 games in their next 6 games. And we were thinking Derby looked like they were going to save themselves. But then an horrific run of form at the end of the season with 6 defeats in a row nearly dragged them down to the relegation zone and got them relegated. They survived literally by a Martin Wycombe penalty. What sort of season do I rate Derby? I'm not going to actually give them a disaster of a season because they did not get relegated. But for the position they were in, I have to by default give them a bad season. It's really been a season to forget for Derby County. We now go to Bristol City. Now this one's also a very difficult season to try and define for Bristol City's sake. Of course, they had an unbelievable start to the season, actually being top of the table by September time. But then after that 4 consecutive wins, they go in a form of 3 defeats and 4. And then Bristol City looked like that they returned their form again with 3 wins in a row. And then all of a sudden, they go through a real dire run of form, including a streak of 7 consecutive defeats. Dean Oldham got sacked, Nigel Pearson got in. He had an alright start, collecting back-to-back wins with Bristol City. but then overall their home form was absolutely atrocious. I think with the ranking, I think I've got to give them a bad season. To finish as nose 19th following the position they found themselves at the start of the season, it's been a pretty bad season on Bristol City standards. We now go to Luton Town. Now, I've been moderately impressed with Luton Town. They've been a side where, last season they were definitely one of the favourites to get relegated following their promotion from League One. And they were still a favourite to get relegated even with their second season in the Championship. But Luton, to be fair to them, never looked like to me that they were ever going to get sucked into the relegation battle. And that's something you've got to give huge credit to Nathan Jones. He really has set his side difficult to break down, but also with the attacking players as well and the transfer policy, I think has been brilliant. Getting Elijah Adebayo in and Carol Naismith in the transfer window, both of those signings have hit the ground running at Luton Town right now. I mean, overall, to finish 12th, following the budget and the size of the team, it's got to be a great tier. They've had an unbelievable season by their standards. Next up, we go to the team one place above them, Millwall. Now, it's been a decent season. Not much has happened, to be honest with you. It's a typical Gary Rowett season for me. They flirted around with the top 6 near the second half of the season. They had a pretty inconsistent start though to the season. They went through a period of 10 games without a win, which is absolutely incredible for the fact that Millwall have decided to stick with Gary Rowett. And to be fair to him, when he did get more of his players back, Millwall started to find their consistency again, because then they went through 9 games without losing. But with that, 5 of those 9 games were draws, and that's been Millwall's problem. They've drawn way too many games in the season. For this season, I think I'm going to give it decent. I wouldn't quite say it's in the average tier. We now go to Rotherham. Now, I'm going to be very quick and frank about it. Rotherham are the first team going into the disaster tier. I cannot excuse them for this season. I know that they had a very tough and hectic schedule due to the COVID outbreak, but with the amount of games they had in hand, they had 4 games in hand and only needed to pick up 4 points from those games in hand to actually capitalise on the teams above them, and they couldn't capitalise on it. They missed out, and in my opinion, they bottled it. Sorry, Rotherham, you're going to have to be the first team that goes into the disaster tier. Another relegated club we're talking about is Wycombe Wanderers. Now, you've got to remember the expectation of Wycombe. Wycombe, likewise with Luton, one of the smallest budgets in the league and one of the more weaker squads on paper in the league. A lot of people, and myself included, thought that they were going to be the whipping boys of the season. And for the fact they lost their first 7 games in a row, I thought that was going to be justified. But to be fair to them with Wycombe and Gareth Ainsworth, the second half of the season, they had a bit of consistency, including them managing to win 3 out of their last 4 games of the season to take it to the final day of the season and to be only 1 point of safety. And you've got to give Wycombe and Gareth Ainsworth a load of credit for that. And as a tier, I would say with their finish, it's been an average season. I can't give them anything more than an average season. How can you have a decent season when you get relegated? So for me, Wycombe are going to be in the average tier, but it could have been decent or even great if they survived the Championship season. Another team who I think who has had an average season on their standards is Birmingham. Now, Birmingham had Aitor Karanka. The expectation was that Aitor Karanka was going to project them up the table with this defensive, stubborn type of football. The transfers Birmingham made looked very ambitious by their standards as well. And they really fell below par. They only picked up back-to-back wins twice all season and only back-to-back wins once under Aitor Karanka being in charge. So it's been a very inconsistent season from Birmingham, and in my opinion, I think they do deserve an average tier. It could have been a bad season if they finished close to relegation, but for the little resurgence Lee Bowyer gave them to get into 18th place, that is a position I would associate Birmingham with. So for me, they've had an average season. We now go to Nottingham Forest. Now, what a fall from grace they've had from last season. I know that they ultimately bottled trying to get into the top 6, but this season, I couldn't have expected that they dropped down 10 whole places down to 17th place. And honestly, it could have been even lower if they hadn't sacked Xabi Lamucci so quickly. Lamucci lost all 4 of his games in charge in Nottingham Forest. Chris Hughton comes in. Ultimately, it's been very difficult for Forest to maintain some consistency. They've never had a winning streak on more than 2 games all season, and that's what's been Nottingham Forest's problem. They've not been able to string a consistent amount of wins. So for me, they've had a bad season, especially with the money they spent, the transfers they brought in, the whole strategy and the manager. It just doesn't work. They definitely need to try something and almost take a step back into next season. And I think just take one big step back and take a couple of steps forward. Then I think Nottingham Forest, can start progressing again. One team who will be very interested to see where you rank is Reading. Now, this was very tough for me to put them in a tier list because, of course, they were absolutely unbelievable at the start of the season. Of course, if you look at their form, it is 8 games without losing a game, 7 of those 8 games coming from wins. Their largest win streak after that only being 3 consecutive wins after that. So Reading, for me, they have had a huge improvement from last season, and I think for that, you've got to give them a great season. Now, I really was doubling between decent and great, and I think overall, I know they fell out of the top 6, and they probably shouldn't have done. But I think for me, even with the progress, the expectation, the players, the performances, I think I've still got to give Reading a great season. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. We now go to Stoke City now. I think Stoke fans will look at this season as a what-if season because their injuries were a real big contributing factor to why Stoke couldn't progress up the table. Of course, they lost Tyrese Campbell very early from injury, and by that time he was closing in on 10 goals. And I think if he was available for the whole season, he would have got at least 15 goals, probably even pushing for 20 goals. And I think the transfers that Stoke brought in just weren't really delivering. I look at someone like Jacob Brown and he's not really delivered up to the level that I really was expecting from him. Even someone like a Stephen Fletcher, he would only have glimpses of great performances, but consistently, he's really not been there. But he's been another player that's been injured as well. So I can't be too hard on them, but I think by the fact they finished 14th, and to be fair, that's actually not too bad compared to some of their finishes in the Championship season. I'm going to say it's an average season for Michael O'Neill. The next team to go over is Preston. Now, Preston's another team to put your finger over. Where do you rank them based on their season? Because it's been an ultimately very inconsistent season. Of course, they had a pretty good season last season for the fact they were in the top 6 for quite a fair bit of the season, but then they dropped off. In the turn of the year, they went through 8 defeats in 12 matches, and I think that form was what drove Alex Neil to be sacked. And then since Frankie McAvoy has come in, Preston have only lost 1 game in their last 8, including winning their last 4 consecutive matches, which was actually their longest winning streak all season. So I think Preston overall, for the fact they finished 13th place, it is sort of around the position you would associate a Preston squad to finish in. So for that reason, I'm going to say it's been a pretty average season in my honest opinion. I know for Max Exeter's they went through January didn't help, but I think they definitely had more within them. We now go to Middlesbrough and Neil Warnock. Now they finished 10th place, they flirted around with the top 6, they were in the top 6 at the start of the season. They dropped off a little bit because they had 4 home defeats in a row, and ultimately that poor form is ultimately why Middlesbrough fell out. It was around the December time where they really struggled. Overall, I'd say it's been a decent season for Middlesbrough because it's a huge improvement from last season, but I wouldn't categorise it as a great season because if it was, they would have been at least close to the top 6, if not in the top 6, and playing Championship playoff football. So for me, they've had a pretty decent season, not bad. Next we go to Queen's Park Rangers. Now they've had 2 entirely different seasons in this season. The beginning part of the season, they was really starting to be crept into the relegation battle, and they looked really perilous in my honest opinion. And I was calling for Mark Warburton to be sacked at one stage, but how foolish of me, because in January, when you listen to him and he brings his transfers in, Queen's Park Rangers go on a mad turnaround, 18 wins in 24 matches, and that is in the second half of the season. That is promotion form, and to pick that up, and for the fact they finished 9th place, 10 whole places at the start of January, which is absolutely unbelievable. They've definitely been the biggest movers in the table since the turn of the year, and I think with that form in itself, to get to the top 10 in the table, where I think for the first time in over 4, maybe even 5 seasons, I've got to give Queen's Park Rangers a great season. We now go to Bournemouth. Now, this one might be controversial, and I'm interested to know where you're going to rank Bournemouth in this season, because for me, they have, if not probably the best squad of the Championship. With Danjuma, Solanke, Billing, David Brooks, got a defensive line of Steve Cook, Metham, Begovic in goal, and Ben Pearson, you know, some of the January transfers as well, Shane Long. Their squad is packed full of quality, but then despite that quality, they just fell down the table. They had 4 straight defeats at one stage of the season, which ultimately got Jason Tyndall sacked. Jonathan Woodgate came in, and to be fair, he actually got some great form in, managed to get 7 consecutive wins for Bournemouth before they lost 3 consecutive games at the end of the season. But ultimately, on that standard, I felt they should have got at least 3rd, if not 2nd, and automatic promotion. And they were in that position at the start of the season. If anything, they needed to use that squad depth to get through to the playoffs. They actually took the advantage against Brentford, having a 2-goal lead on aggregate, but they completely threw it away by idiotic decisions, tactics, and overall, this may be harsh, but I'm actually giving Bournemouth a bad season for not getting promoted. I felt with the transfers to squad players, this would have been the biggest opportunity for Bournemouth to get promoted, to bounce straight back up to the Premier League. Now with all their players being linked with a move away, it's going to be doubly as difficult now for Bournemouth to get promoted. So I'm putting their season as a bad season. That might be wrong, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Next we go to Blackburn, and similarly to Bournemouth, they've had a fantastic squad on paper with some of the loan deals that they got in, and with the attacking players that they've got in their disposal. They should be doing so much better than what they have been doing, Blackburn Rovers. For the fact they were actually in the top 6 and flirting around with it near the start of the season, then they went through a real poor run of form, and especially in the turn of the year when they actually only won once in 17 matches. That is why Blackburn fell all the way down to 15th place. And with that squad, to get 28 goals from a single player and still finish 15th place, for me, I'm sorry, but I think Blackburn have had a really bad season. And I think Tony Mowbray has really underperformed. We now go to Coventry, and it's been a decent return for Coventry back in the Championship, hasn't it? They finished 16th place. And ultimately, in around the mid-stage of the season, I was fearing for Coventry a little bit. They were starting to creep more defeats in. I was a bit worried about Coventry's survival chances. But when the pressure mounted, Mark Robbins, I don't know what he said to this Coventry side, but they resurged their run of form. They managed to pick up 5 wins in their last 7 matches. Unbelievable turnaround in form for Coventry. And to finish 16th place as well, with the expectation and the standards as well, and for the ground sharing as well, which could have disrupted the players, you've got to give Coventry a hell of a lot of credit there. I don't think they quite have a great season. If they actually pushed for top half, I would have said it would have been a great season, but it's been a very decent return to the Championship for me for Coventry. We now go to the champions Norwich. Now, do I really need to say what I need to say about Norwich? They have had a load of expectation getting relegated from the Premier League. They didn't start all that well, only 1 win in their opening 4 matches. But since then, Norwich picked up some consistency, managed to pick up 7 wins in their next 10 matches, only 1 defeat in 16 matches. That level consistency in the Championship is unheard of. And for me, Norwich have got to go to the elite tier. Unlike Bournemouth, they had the fantastic squad in front of them and they achieved their standards. This is what I expected Bournemouth to be doing with Norwich. And the fact that Norwich have done it, you've got to give them credit. They prepared for this and they played it right as well. 96 points is a great points return for Norwich. They go to the elite tier. So from the top of the table, we go right to the bottom of the table with Sheffield Wednesday. It has been a disastrous season. I know part of it has not been the squad players' fault. Part of it has been from the ownership and the organisation of funds over the years, and obviously with their points deduction. But the change in managers, just the whole season as a whole, it has been a huge disaster. But I do wish him all the luck to try and bounce straight back up to the Championship, because it's a big and a proud historic club. We now go to Huddersfield Town. Now, I think some people will be telling me that they've had an average season based on the position that they've finished. But to be honest with you, this is still Huddersfield Town, the team 2 seasons ago. They were playing Premier League football. So I'm sorry, you know, for them to finish 20th, there's no excuse for it. I know they've had injuries likewise with Stoke, and it's another what-if season if they had all their players available. But I think you've got to draw in a couple of similarities when you look at Mikel Arteta, Frank Lampard, all those managers who've not managed many first teams before. There's moments of brilliance in Huddersfield. I'm not denying that. There are moments of brilliance, but there's also moments of tactical naivety. And I think that is exactly what Carlos Corberán have. Overall, with the Huddersfield fan base, it's been very mixed how they feel about Carlos Corberán as their manager. Overall, for the fact they finished 20th, I'm sorry, but I'm going to give them a bad season for that. To finish 20th place in a Championship table, you're going to need to have a pretty bad season for that. Got 2 teams left. We've now got Watford to get automatically promoted. I know they went through a sticky period under Ivic, of course, which got him sacked. But then Munoz comes in, and since he's come in, no one has picked up more points at home, no one's scored more goals, and no one's conceded less goals than Watford have done since Munoz has come in. And you'd think at the start of the season, if he came in, I think Watford could have run away with the league. So for me, Watford have to go to the elite tier. To bounce straight back up into the Premier League takes a lot for the players to cope through the devastation of them getting relegated, and you've got to give Watford a load of credit. And the final team to rank is the loser of the playoff finals, Swansea City. Now this was very, very tough because I'm almost linking it a bit similarly to Bournemouth. With the squad players they've got, this was as big of an opportunity as any to go up, especially for the fact that they did finish in the top 6. There was a period where they could have pushed to the top 2 where Watford were not quite running away with it in second place. But of course, they went through 4 defeats in a row, and that's what has killed their season. But they did have the big chance. They managed the 2 playoff games against Barnsley extremely well, but they ultimately bottled it in the final. And I think with Ayew potentially leaving, Woodman potentially leaving, we could have a similarly max exodus for the Swansea City side. And this will be their 4th consecutive season now back in the Championship. For me, I can't quite give them a bad season because I think they have produced enough goods for me not to give them a bad season. But I think it's been average. I really think it has been average. You could argue I should have given them decent to give them a playoff final, which probably actually would have been a fairer ranking. But the way that they lost it, and with the squad players they have and the implications that they can have, I'm going to give Swansea an average season. So there you have it, guys. This is my final tier list of every single Championship club's Championship season ranked. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But this draws a conclusion to the 2020 and 21 Championship season. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure you do give this video a like. It does tremendously help the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't done it. It does really, really help the channel. And please share this channel to as many people as you can. All that would really make my day. But thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are legendary if you saw the end of this video. And as always, take care, everyone.